Happy Monday morning, people. Let's get this week started right with some Countdown to Classic. This is a podcast that educates, informs, and gossips about World of Warcraft Classic. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we discuss the news, hot button issues, and content of the highly anticipated World of Warcraft Classic. I'm your host, Josh Corbett, and as you all know by now, this is a show where it's not my opinion on World of Warcraft that counts, but yours. Yes, you there, sitting in your cubicle wondering if anyone would notice if you popped off that silent fart. You! Countdown to Classic spends the next 90 minutes or so hearing your expert opinion on the hot button issues surrounding the impending release of the sure-to-be amazing World of Warcraft Classic. If you hear anything on the show that you'd like to comment on, then check countdowntoclassic.com for all the social links, or email feedback@countdowntoclassic.com with your reactions or memory lane or anger management submissions. If you would like your quick WoW Classic takes or questions featured on the show, then please do contact me and call in from about 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time onwards on Friday and Saturday nights, and join in on Countdown to Classic's pre-recorded talkback radio sessions. Either email feedback@countdowntoclassic.com or join the show's amazing Discord channel via the link in the show notes and reach out to me there. There'll be more shout outs and show news towards the end of the show, so please do stick around to possibly hear me throw you some love and give you some updates on what's to come throughout this week. But for now, let's get to the news and discussions of the week with this week's Forum and Fauna. Each Monday, Countdown to Classic breaks down some of the hottest forum topics through the week on either the WoW Classic Reddit page or the official WoW Classic forums. As always when we do this, Countdown to Classic breaks down both sides of the coin and goes into bat for both sides of an argument so everyone gets their say and you get all the information with which you can then make an informed decision about how you feel with a certain topic. And the first topic that I bring you this week is actually one that the poster let me know that apparently this very show, Countdown to Classic, inspired them to make the actual post. And then it really heated up like no other that I've seen since the show started. This particular topic got over 600 comments on the WoW Classic subreddit, which had me thinking, wow, way to go with getting people to talk about WoW Classic. Anyway, that poster was user adankfrank what's up, and they started the following thread, titled Unpopular Opinion Thread, and they said the following within it. Post your unpopular opinions about Classic WoW here. Now, I really should preface this with what we're going to hear through this first topic is obviously some posters putting forward concepts that they fully realize are unpopular. And it may not even be things that they particularly believe in, but they somewhat hold on to them, and in spite of them realizing that they are unpopular opinions, have been brave and put them forward in the spirit of the post. So here we go. Buckle up and don't enter this topic if you're on medication or you're pregnant, because it's going to get very bumpy and interesting and requires somewhat of an open mind. But as we do, both sides of the coin, everyone. So here we go. The first post I bring you was from the user Give Me a Drink, who actually posts twice, but I'll go through both of them, and they say the following. Pure no changes is incompatible with recreating the vanilla experience. Discovery and theory crafting are at the core of the vanilla experience, and they are nullified by recreating the same game with the same values. The AQ effort is a great example. Leaving it unchanged will trivialize it. And their second post flows on from that. That's not a reason to create a museum. There are plenty of possible changes that would be in line with vanilla, all while opening up new strategies, builds, specs, group comps, etc. And this is before even starting about releasing unfinished content like planned battlegrounds or raids or zones. To me, that would be closer to vanilla than releasing at 1.12 and staying there forever. During vanilla, the game changed often. And whoa, that's Countdown to Classic kicking off with a doozy there. And let's begin with that rather big point. And that is, what is the vanilla experience? Well, to me, it was being dropped into a relatively unknown, huge world. And yes, discovery was definitely one of the driving factors behind that quote-unquote vanilla experience. Now, this unpopular opinion is that if it's a big aim of WoW Classic to recreate that classic feeling or that vanilla experience, then doesn't that fly in the face of the hashtag no changes movement? Is there a way in which we could tweak what you can without breaking the game? Perhaps that's by way of, I don't know, different stats, different AQ items, different honor system, anyone? Who knows? But some tweaks that, now some of you very much so may say, Josh, everything you just said is absolutely game breaking. Are you high? In which I would answer, no, I'm not high, but however, we're snowballing here. So, think about it. What possible small things could Blizzard do that might actually enable us to go through everything starry-eyed all over again and be like, whoa, I haven't seen this before. This is new. Because the point is that, yes, we have years of theory crafting, years of experiencing this content over and over again. How can Blizzard, without getting the no changes crowd all rankled up, possibly put a fresh coat of paint on this? And yes, that is obviously a very unpopular opinion given the way in which the no changes movement has been steamrolling through the forums and everything. But I thought I'd just start there just to get you all a little bit riled up and get the blood pumping. But I come back to you, and perhaps this one's for the no changes crowd. And we go to a post now by user Machamatsu, who fights back a little bit for the no changes crowd with the following post. That has nothing to do with the point you were making about new experiences. You cannot recreate the vanilla experience. Your post seemed to suggest that you can recreate it by changing the game. You can't. You can only make vanilla WoW or a game that isn't vanilla WoW. That's a very good point there, and is what that user is saying obviously somewhat true? Now, I'm just going to throw in a bit of a spoiler alert for Lost here. So if you haven't seen Lost, just go put your fingers in your ear and go la, la, la for the next 10 seconds. I feel like Jack from Lost sort of shouting outside an airport, we have to go back, and Kate telling me that we can't go back. Is that how it is with the vanilla experience of WoW? Are we never going to get that again? Are we done with ever being able to, as I say, have those starry eyes and go, whoa, this is all amazing? Are we so jaded that we've seen everything that there is to see and we've done everything there is to do that we can't possibly be surprised anymore or impressed or taken aback by what the developers have to offer us? I actually say no. I believe, now I do understand what this user is saying and I agree with them. I think very much so that there is no way to recreate that vanilla experience in a way in that, yes, it's either vanilla WoW or it's another game. I completely concur with that viewpoint. However, I think the one thing to build from that is, whilst you can't go through your vanilla experience again that you had originally, you could possibly have a different vanilla experience in that there's so much content in this gorgeous, gorgeous game. The experience that we have is actually malleable and it's completely dictated by the user. As I've suggested in the past, if you were a heavy PvE player back in the day, well, you might decide now to go heavy on the PvP and enjoy a completely different experience with the game. Well, you might say, hey Josh, I hate PvP and that's why I stray away from it. If I'm going to go back to the PvE experience, what possibly could I do that would make things different? Well, you could now roll Horde instead of Alliance. You could roll Alliance instead of Horde. You could change up your classes. You could completely change up your role. Did you play as a DPS character last time? Mix things up and go with the tank. That is going to change the vanilla experience for you. See things through a different set of eyes for once. So I'd sort of agree and disagree with that post, but I think it's a fantastic post nonetheless. Okay. Moving on to the next point from user Dark Phenomenon, who says this. Players are still just as bad now as they were before, and classic raids won't be a face roll for 99.9% of the player base. We get a replying submission from user Johnny to that, who says, having played on several private servers, a significant portion of the player base is still both bad and lazy and can't be asked even if information is a click away. Lots of people still fuck up in dead mines for God's sakes. A 13-year-old introduction instance. And to those two posts, I say this, yes, something I am very much on board with and completely in agreement with in relation to what they're touching on. And it definitely is an unpopular opinion as far as I'm concerned from what I've seen in the forums thus far, and places me and these users in the minority. I do feel that we are still, and I've said this before on the show, that we as a whole are going to struggle with the content. Now, Classic is a challenge for the majority of players. All of you people who are screaming that it's not, you're amazing players. And I completely understand where you're coming from when you scoff and say, Josh, do you know why you say Classic is hard? Because you're a fucking twat of a player. And I completely readily accept that. However, what I also would ask that you accept is some players perhaps, I think, don't have quite the grasp on the proportion of numbers in terms of skillful or elitist, however you like to term them, players versus average players versus flat out bad players. You know that great players aren't a dime a dozen. That's why I see you all pitching about it online. You're crying out, where are all the good players at? Where can I get a great guildie around here? What's going on? What do I have to do? You all suck. I'm the best. Blah, blah, blah. You know that it's hard to find skilled players. There is a reason. There's a bit of a bell curve in WoW. The majority of players are pretty average at the game, yet you still say that the content will be face rolled. But what happens when you're the only great player, or perhaps one of two, in a pickup group? What will you say then? Will you be reminded pretty quickly that, oh yes, we're struggling through this dungeon or through this raid when there's 40 of you because it is hard to find good help in World of Warcraft? And flowing on from that, how hard will it be to get a collection of you together? Yes, of course. The upper tier guilds will have essentially pre-made guilds. They've got their buddies who are great at the game and they'll roll through the content. I do not dispute that in any way. The content will get taken down quickly by some. And when I say by some, I still feel by very few. I think the vast majority of us will very much so be moaning our way through mid-tier content in a way, if you know what I mean. But if you disagree with what I'm saying, by all means, email the show, feedback@countdowntoclassic.com. Tell me how wrong I am, and if it's well put, I will happily read it out on the show. But we move on to user I Dated a Yeti, who says this in response to the above. You're so naive to think that. Even if you haven't played on a private server, which the majority of people that will play Classic have done, information is just a click away. Simply optimizing your talent build and not clicking 90% of your spells will increase raid productivity tenfold. And a reply along those lines from user Jar Tipper, who says this: lots of people fucking up dead mines are like 12 years old as well. Those who make it to 60 are typically a bit better. Raiding in new Classic will be much easier to find competent players when you factor in the fact that most people have adequate hardware now and access to add-ons and more information for everyone. And the point there is that private server play kind of displays how far we've come as a player base skill-wise. People are awesome now at this game on the whole. You were so wrong, Josh, earlier. We are a kick-ass group of players. World of Warcraft is like child's play to us these days. The people you're speaking about won't be involved in Classic. The shitty players, they won't be around. And if they are, they'll have gotten better with time. MMOs aren't new to us anymore like they were around the days of WoW Vanilla. And also, another point is that generally the crowd will be a little bit older due to that nostalgia bug bringing everyone back. What comes with age? A bit of experience. Perhaps that will flow into a bit of extra skill. And then you get to the face rolling element of the game. And also, on top of that, as the user mentions, our hardware will be better. Our internet connections will be better. Lag, maybe that will be a thing of the past, won't be an issue like it was back in the day. There were a lot of problems with that before. Trust me, I know, particularly having played the game from Australia. I was very used to, as I've mentioned before, 300 to 400 millisecond lag. And yes, did it make the game frustrating? Absolutely. Did it make the game that little bit harder? For sure. On top of that, bugged encounters. Those will all presumably be fixed up in Classic. This is all just adding up to why the content will be easier. However, personally, I really must quickly add that I just disagree with a few points that those two users brought up, and they are the following. I do disagree that the majority of people who play Classic will have played on a private server. One of those users mentioned that earlier, and I think that's a bit of a throwaway comment. I don't believe that private servers are quite as accessible as people think. Now, again, I can hear you all scoffing, going, Josh, it's so bloody easy to set up. I know. I did it, and I'm moderately handy technologically speaking, but I mean, I could set it up. That's all well and good, but I do know people that couldn't. For example, one listener of the show, and actually one of my co-hosts for the Cinephiles podcast that I do, is a World of Warcraft fan. When I told him about the concept of private servers, he hadn't heard of them before, so I explained it to him, and he said, how would one go about checking this out or setting it up? And I explained it, and he just went, that all sounds a little bit hard for me. And this guy is not by any means a technological dum-dum, but wasn't either particularly interested or it just sounded like a little bit of work. And I feel like that stops a lot of people from checking out these private servers. If it's not terribly easy, and I know it is pretty easy, guys, give me a little bit of a break, but for some people, they see it as a slight hurdle to get over. What? I've got to go into a WTF file and change some text? Oh, man. Look, for some people, that is hard. So I just say that it's not perhaps as super duper accessible as some people seem to think. But I will say that I got into it a fraction today as well with someone on another Discord channel who actually also stated that private servers, they believed, would outperform WoW Classic after its release in terms of numbers. I thought that was a little bit preposterous. I mean, shout me down if you think otherwise. Please do. But I just thought, and maybe many of you agree with me, that this kind of is supposed to be the private server killer. Now, I'm working on the presumption that World of Warcraft Classic is delivered to us in a fantastic fashion that makes the vast majority of people happy. Obviously, if they make 1 billion changes, then it's going to produce something that might push people back to private servers. I do understand that. But in the hypothetical world where World of Warcraft Classic is perfect and we're loving it, then I very much so disagree with that person that I spoke to earlier today. And I said, well, I really think we're going to get at least over 1 million people for World of Warcraft Classic, so what do you think private servers get? It's an interesting argument, but either way, to bring a very long point back home, what I'm trying to say is that definitely, no way have the majority of people who are going to be playing World of Warcraft Classic jumped onto a private server. Either they felt hindered by A, moral obligation not to play, B, scared of legality, C, have stopped playing the game in general and aren't particularly interested, and only an official version of World of Warcraft Classic might be enough to bring them back. Or simply never delved into a private server because they didn't want their characters to potentially be lost one day. But anyway, that's a bit of a side note there of why I think WoW Classic will absolutely potentially put a bit of an end to private servers. Not to finality. I know that some will still carry on and still have their own user base, but I think for the most part, it's kind of going to quell that whole movement. That's the whole point of Classic. But anyway, back to what these users were saying. Sorry, that was a very long tangent. Onto the skill of the users. People actually stopped clicking in Classic as it was going on, in vanilla, I should say. Why do we all act like we were fuckwits the whole time during vanilla? We played it for over 2 years and we got better as the game went on. We learned things. We learned how to play our class. We learned how to stop clicking spells. We learned how to stop keyboard turning, all of that jazz. Granted, not all of us learnt those lessons, but I would suggest the vast majority did, because I very vividly remember playing vanilla with a lot of very skillful players back in the day. Not myself, but everyone else was great. So this whole notion, there's an overarching point that everyone sucked in vanilla. Now, and another point that relies on that is, we had no information back then. We had nothing to read. We only had Thoughtbot, and there were no guides, and there was no YouTube, and we were all idiots. But again, people act like we had absolutely no information. That's simply not true. I vividly remember jumping on forums and reading some exceptionally detailed class guides and theory crafting all about how to best play your class. Now, granted, they were very much so works in progress, and of course we know a shitload more now than we did then, but to say that we were all flying blind then, I think is a complete and utter fallacy. We absolutely had some resources at our fingertips that we could turn to. Moving on from that, the thought that, it was the 12-year-olds that were fucking up your instance runs. They won't be around for Classic, so we'll be fine. Well, no, I'm sorry to tell you, but 12-year-olds will be playing Classic too. I pretty much guarantee it. We're going to get a pretty wide demographic on this one. Again, they're going to be in the vast minority, but they're going to be there, much like how they were back in the day. And you might say, well, yeah, back in the day, because that's all we had, Josh. This is now going back to an old game. Why would the young people come over to an old game? And the reason being, there's a crowd for everything. Think of your 12-year-old self. There's probably plenty of your 12-year-old selves out there who are into old school, hardcore MMORPGs. And whether you term WoW as one of those or not, it's definitely a very different beast to some other options that are out there. And there might be younger people who that appeals to. So to suggest that they won't be playing, again, I think is a bit of a reach. And finally, on the lag point that those users raised, yes, as I say, lag was a factor, but I don't blame the 300 to 400 millisecond lag I experienced as being the reason for my failure. It was something that you could overcome. Like, granted, it made the game a little bit harder, but that wasn't the reason for wiping. It was other things relating to my skill, usually. But to blame the lag and the hardware, I think, and that's one of the, now that we won't have lag, guess what? Everyone's going to be awesome. Again, I just think, no, I think it's going to be a really big combination of a number of things that, yes, will perhaps be better, but not to the extent that some people think we will. Again, if you loudly disagree, please email the show and let me know. We move on to the next point with user Zim, who says this: I don't take this game too seriously, and elitists are going to ruin it for me and others like me. I already have a lot of issues with D-bags in retail fighting with everyone over every little thing, and feel that since Classic is a much less casual experience, it's going to be 100 times worse. And the point that Zim raises is that perhaps Classic is going to be flooded with elitists to the point that you will not have a good time if you aren't an elitist. Now, granted, some of us are very, very good at the game. Some of you listening to this are going, well, I'm not going to have a problem. I'm pretty fucking good at the game, so bring it on. More of my elitist brethren. I'm happy. However, for other people, they might be wondering, how many times could I handle getting barked at over my spec choice or being told that my gear absolutely fucking sucks before I crack it? Will it be overwhelming, that kind of noise that people might hear, due to there now being definitively right and wrong answers in some people's minds after years of theory crafting as to what specs are the way to go and what specs are not? How dare you play that spec? You should not be wearing that gear. What the fuck is wrong with you? There are right and wrong answers to this, and you are clearly riding around with the wrong answer, you absolute noob, you absolute dickhead. How many times do we think we're going to be able to put up with that? Or are we going to argue back and say, no, sir, I believe it's you who have actually got it wrong? The elitists, and how many of them will be in the game? How will that affect WoW for you? Do you agree that there will be a lot of them there, or do you think it's a little bit overplayed? Now, we move on to the next point. Yelnik, who says this: who knows what communities will be like now, but back in retail vanilla, I met some of the nicest, most helpful people I've come across on the internet. If you wanted an all-out hardcore experience, then you could find guilds for that, but it was usually pretty clear what you were getting into. And I think the point that they're raising there is, realistically, World of Warcraft Classic is not going to be very different to what vanilla was like back in the day. It's going to be just the same. You will get an absolutely very broad cross-section of players. Yes, you'll have the elitists, and they'll have each other, but you'll also have the nice people. And just remember that the elitists are generally a very loud minority. Most average nice players don't really post on forums, so there's sort of a skewed view on what Classic's demographic is going to look like. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of very nice people that post on forums as well, but I'm just saying there's that bulk of people in the middle of the very average video game user player base, such as with World of Warcraft, who don't get overly caught up with jumping online, checking forums, or even to the point that they would regularly post. They might lurk a little bit, but it is the people who really care about the game, who know about the game so well, who are so damn good at the game, that have a bit more of a predilection to regularly posting on places like Reddit, on places like the official forums and things like that. There's some hyper intelligent people there. Whether you turn them as elitists or not, I'm not so sure, but I find their opinions fascinating, and it's taught me so much about the game. Whether these people are the same people that are going to be calling me a fuckwit when the game starts might be the case, but we shall wait and see. I think that there's a lot of nice people. It's just like regular life. You go outside your front door, you might bump into an asshole, but you might meet a shitload of nice people as well, and generally the good outweighs the bad, so I'm sure that we'll be fine. We move on to the next point. Labadido, who says this: all add-ons assisting you in either raiding or questing should be disabled. Very interesting point, this one. Now, I ask you listeners this. Granted, it's a very unpopular opinion, so it fits within the theme of the post, but technically speaking, is that a change? If somehow, and I don't want to get into the technical ability of Blizzard to do this. I've been reading a lot online. I know people are saying like, no, Blizzard could just change the API and that wouldn't necessarily break the ability to make an add-on for the game. It would just break whatever add-ons had already been developed and things like that. Look, I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm not a technical guy, so please don't send the angry emails over that. But what I'm getting at is, if somehow there was a way in which to disable add-ons, would you term that as a hashtag change? add-ons, in a way, they're kind of like, I don't know, a very rough way of putting it, like the game within the game, even though it's not a game. I don't know, an Inception style kind of thing. But what I'm getting at is, with the add-ons and the muddled UIs that you saw so many different photos of back in the day, some crazy ones, people have a million things running. If we were to strip that away from absolutely every user, does that count as a change? You haven't changed the game. You've just changed the accessibility to some information. You've just changed the look of people's UIs. You've just changed a little bit of customization to perhaps the display of the game. Now, I know there's a lot of extra stuff there, and I'm not going to go into it so much, but I just thought that was something really interesting to think about. And yes, I would agree that is a very unpopular opinion, and a lot of people will be jumping up and down right now going, mate, you're crazy. But you'll enjoy the next post that says this from user Goldenberry from the official forums. There were tons of add-ons in vanilla. Having none doesn't make it authentic. Besides, you don't have to use them if you like the challenge. Just don't use them. Anyone remember CT raid frames in Molten Core and Onyxia? And the point that user raises is, if you don't like it, just don't use it. Similar to the old TV theory, if you're not liking what you're seeing on the screen, just turn it off. If other people do happen to like the ability to have add-ons, then don't mess with them. You just walk away and don't get involved. It was a part of vanilla, albeit an external factor in a way, but that would actually kind of be a pretty big change, wouldn't it? Imagine no DPS meters at all. How does that make things better? No customizable unit frames. Don't mess with my choice of UI. Get your hands off of it. If you truly want the authentic vanilla experience, then it's all in. I want my horrible mess of a screen riddled with add-ons that I probably don't even need half of them if I so choose. So, add-ons plus vanilla equals WoW Classic. That's how it goes, as this user says. Moving on to user Jacobov, who says this. Once it launches, Classic WoW will be an unbearable shit show of hardcore trolling, griefing, and just all the worst that the world of gaming has to offer. People will take it so seriously that all the ultra degenerates will gleefully be as bad as it's possible to be. The community will drown in drama. Classic WoW will get more coverage than possibly any other gaming venture ever because of the circumstances and history of it. And this will compel all the 4chan and r/WoW server types to make it their magnum opus of arseholery. Blizzard will have to battle constant DDoS attempts too, as it'll be the juiciest target ever seen in gaming history. Now, in regards to that post, I've got a little bit of an unpopular opinion of my own, which kind of falls in line with this post, and I'm going to tell you what that is. World of Warcraft Classic is kind of a remaster. Now, I know you've all just jumped back, but listen, hear me out. Whilst we might not be getting updated graphics, we might not be getting any changes or anything like that, it's still a re-release. We're getting something old delivered back to us again, perhaps with some kind of very light new coat of paint, whether that's just bug fixes or whatever it might be. Whether you use the term remaster or not, it's, hey, look, here's the shiny best version of this old thing that you love that you can possibly have. It's a special edition, if you know what I mean. And we've kind of been through that before with other products, movies and whatnot, whatever you want to call it. And if we do kind of term this as a remaster in a way, it's the most ambitious one yet in my mind. In a time when everyone is doing it with video games, this is kind of a watershed moment for gaming. I'm not trying to be hyperbolic, but this is really actually a pretty big moment for the industry with the release of World of Warcraft Classic. It might determine what happens with MMOs in the future moving forward. Now, I keep coming back to the analogy of in Hollywood, you've got the Westerns, which obviously died and people tried to resurrect them over time, things like that. Clint Eastwood did a pretty good job at one point. But Will this be the game that revives the so-called dead genre of MMOs? Will WoW Classic, quote unquote, bring it back? Will it be in vogue again? Now, I know the genre isn't entirely dead, and I'm one of those people that poo-poos the notion that it's dead. I don't think it's dead, I just think it's sleeping. But perhaps World of Warcraft, and there is a lot of pressure in a way on World of Warcraft Classic's shoulders, will be the injection that this genre that we love so much needs. And I really do agree that I think this is a pretty big deal, and that some of the notions that user puts forward with the attention it will get, perhaps from some more negative corners, might very well come. There's a lot riding on this, but we shall see. We move now to the next post from user Albu, and this is actually from MMO Champion, and they say the following. While not dividing your player base is an important rule in game development, I think Blizzard, somewhat begrudgingly, accepted at some point last year that there's an entire community full of people that will never play retail again, but wants to or is already playing vanilla somewhere. So since their player base is already divided, the real decision they're facing seems to be, do I want to be paid for letting these people play vanilla and get some really good PR out of it? Or do I want to keep paying lawyers and not be collecting money from them playing vanilla elsewhere, whilst also having to deal with constant rebels spawning in my forums? And the point that user raises is, if there's going to be dramatic elitist assholes playing the game somewhere, then we might as well give them our version and make some money while we're at it, coming from Blizzard's perspective, obviously. If people want the game, how they act within it is up to them. Maybe that's part of the way that they enjoy the WoW experience. But honestly, maybe this so-called gathering of the clans is for the best in WoW Classic. Let's get everyone in the one place. Let's get all you private server players. Let's get all you people who've never played the game before. Let's get all you returning players who might have quit for the last few years. Let's get all you retail players. Let's just get everyone together, start the melting pot, and see what happens. The player base is already highly divided. What we need now is something to come together over. At least with an official version of Classic, it's a place where we can all either bitch about stuff together or just enjoy a goddamn video game together. Maybe it's going to heal the wounds if it's awesome. We get to the next post from user Empty Allocution, who says this. I don't think Blizzard have any plans to include expansions into WoW Classic. I think it's going to be vanilla and vanilla only. I see a lot of folks talking about the prospects of BC and Wrath. I just don't see it. If they need more infrastructure in place for vanilla, they need it for every other consecutive expansion, and they need to be actively managing it. Just looking at that from a top-down perspective highlights the work and responsibilities involved. I don't think it's going to happen. We should be happy that we're getting vanilla. And the point that user raises is a really interesting one, and it's something that's obviously been coming up a fair bit. What happens next? Do we get Burning Crusade servers? Do we get Wrath servers? Where does this go from here? And the unpopular opinion that they're raising, and I would agree that it seems to be slightly unpopular because a lot of people do seem to think that is the natural progression of things, but their opinion is no. This is a one-off venture. We are just getting vanilla because there was a great campaign for it, a lot of people wanted it, and now we're getting it. Blizzard is somewhat begrudgingly giving us this product. They don't want to keep going. They don't want to take the time and effort to relive all the glory days, expansion by expansion. They've got to focus already, and it's called retail. Classic is just here to appease what is, in the grand scheme of things, a relatively minor amount of World of Warcraft fans. Blizzard is not in the business of looking to the past. Blizzard has told us vanilla means vanilla, and they've intimated very strongly that they do not want to devote a lot of cash or a lot of effort or a lot of staff to this venture. as little effort is going into this as possible in a way, so you don't jump down my throat for that one. Obviously, they're going to try and make the best product that they can make, but they're trying to do it very much so without going nuts about it. But that's been the vibe from Blizzard. What's in it for them to keep going through every expansion? Well, the next post tells us from user Flyleaf, and it says this: Blizzard will do what makes them money. That's a very good point. Cha-ching. Of course we will get the other expansions if WoW Classic is successful. They will go through as many as they have to go through. Probably not Cataclysm, but they'll give us Burning Crusade. They will give us Wrath of the Lich King Classic servers if WoW Classic is successful and makes bank. Blizzard is in the business of making money. They have shareholders to report back to, and those shareholders like profit. And what will bring profit? Further servers continuing on down the chain to these rabid fans who continue to pay subscriber fees. If in, let's say, 2 to 3 years after Classic's release, everyone's still on board saying, Blizz, what's the next step? Of course they're going to develop it. Whether we ask for it or not, perhaps. They just realize that there is money to be made in nostalgia. And this very well might prove the point. So that's a great point there. Next, we have user Iron Maiden 667 who says this: I don't have faith Classic will actually launch. If it does, it will take so long, the hype train will have died down quite a bit. And then they went on to say this: it's not unheard of for Blizzard to cancel a project, such as StarCraft Ghosts and Project Titan. And that is a heartbreaking point to consider. Oh God, could you even imagine or wrap your head around it? But they've done it before when they were even further down the road with those projects. Now, as far as I know, and again, tell me if I'm wrong, Blizzard was years into development of Project Titan when they stopped that one. It's not inconceivable, and I know it's incredibly unlikely, but listen to this point. It is not impossible that they cancel WoW Classic. Tell me if you would agree with that. It's not impossible. And when I say that, I don't mean there's not a 0% chance that they would cancel Classic. However, it might be 0.01. But what I'm saying is it's not impossible. And to be honest with you, as more time goes by, the more that dread seeps into my thinking, where I'm like, God, could you actually imagine? I wonder if they got to a possible point where they felt they were in way over their heads with the development of this game, that either it's just not as possible as they once thought it was technologically, or if they felt they were going to deliver something that just wouldn't make enough people happy, and they just say, you know what, sorry guys, we fucked up. We thought we could do it. We can't. It's clear that too many of you are too divisive over too many issues, and we're not going to be able to please enough of you, so we're just not doing it. That obviously would break all our hearts, but could it happen? Who knows? The more time that goes by without any news, I get very, very upset. But the next post might alleviate those concerns when we hear from user Chipye, who says this: the BlizzCon announcement and the trailer would haunt them forever. There is no turning back now. And I do agree with that post. The community would absolutely murder Blizzard. That would be a PR nightmare that would be very, very hard to come back from. There would be riots. God, Ian Hazacostas would potentially be dragged out of Blizzard HQ and publicly pantsed out the front so that we can all laugh at his Mickey Mouse underwear or whatever it is he might wear. You know that scene at the start of Argo? That's what's going to happen if Blizz cancels Classic. Just perhaps without the hostage situation. Maybe. But we go to the next post from user HasHap. And I know this has been a very long segment, guys, but it was a really interesting one, and that's why I've dedicated a bit of time to it. And all they say this is about their unpopular opinion alert. The potential of classic WoW will be wasted on #NoChanges. And that's a very deep point that they're making there. And kind of the main point of the changes crowd, I guess, is that it's something that warrants thought and discussion, really. I know many of you are no changes people, and just a reminder, I am no changes. But some of you believe that it's heresy to even discuss changes. I don't subscribe to that theory because, you know what? I advocate for critical thinking. Yes, I want no changes, but we can talk about anything, whether it gets done or not. I don't want them, but, let's talk about why you think a change should be made and have an intelligent conversation about it. But the point here is Blizzard missing a chance to make history because of #NoChanges? If Blizzard were to rewrite history and remaster the game as a perfect experience in 2018, wouldn't that be the killer blow and just absolutely cement their authority over the genre and the industry? Look, we made the perfect remake of Classic. Here is the perfect game. We nailed it. Here's what it always should have been. Now, a lot of you are freaking out right now, but relax, I've got your backs. I couldn't find a reply against that post that I just read. And I lied to you because I said it was the last one, but it's actually not because, well, it was the last one I found on the forums, but here's the real last post. It's on a post. It's from me. I couldn't find a reply, so I'm going to give you my own take on this now. And I apologize for going all Jerry Springer on you, but here we go. The answer to the previous post that I just read is no. The potential of classic WoW lies in its ability to take people back through a gaming experience that we hold dear as one of the greatest that we've ever had. To change that is to pervert our memories and connection to the game. Another guy made a few minor tweaks here and there to a beloved franchise once, George Lucas. How well was that received? People get pissed for a reason when you mess with their nostalgia, and people like to relive a beloved memory exactly as it was. Sure, Blizzard has the option to not give us this at all, and it is their product to do with as they please at the end of the day. But, and I'm paraphrasing South Park slightly here, but this has become somewhat more than Blizzard's property. This is such a universally beloved game, experience, and artwork that its ownership has somewhat passed over to the public realm, in a manner of speaking. World of Warcraft has a small piece of all of us contained within it. The game is designed so that we ultimately determine how that world will grow and remain. We, the players, make up its population, its society, its culture, its economy, and its success. Blizzard built the house, but we made it a home. And that's why no changes means so much to so many people. And that's been Josh's final thoughts. Sorry to get all deep on you, but I thought it would be nice to kind of wind up with that. I did get a little bit of flack this week from someone, and it was interesting I do appreciate the constructive criticism is fantastic. Got a bit of flack this week online from someone saying that they felt that this show was way too no changes leaning, and that I had a clear agenda to shout down all of the changes crowd. I do dispute that slightly. I feel like I give a lot of airtime to the changes crowd, and that's the whole meaning of the show, is to give both sides of the argument. As you can see, I do lean no changes, but I will hear any argument. But obviously, I do have a preference, and I'm sorry to that person that I offended, but, that's the way it is with the show. But anyway, how about we liven things up now with topic number 2? And this topic was a post I found again on the WoW Classic subreddit. It was posted by user Raynok, and it simply was titled this: Is Classic worth $15 a month? and they said the following. This is something I've been thinking about for a while now. It didn't really bother me at first, but I feel like this is a topic that needs to be discussed. Value. What's the value of paying for a game with no updates? Imagine a game company today releases a game and told their community, okay everyone, here's the complete game we've been working on. We won't be adding any more content or making any changes in any way. Oh, and by the way, it's $15 a month. That would absolutely not fly. From Blizzard's perspective, they're not planning on making changes or adding anything to vanilla that wasn't already there, which is great and I'm all for it. Go team, no changes. We also know that Classic will be a server option in the retail version, which means that it's a one subscription rules all scenario. Players would have the choice between playing the retail version or Classic all under one subscription. This may sound great on the surface, but for those of us who have absolutely no plans on buying the 4 expansions to play retail, it makes zero sense from a value perspective. If we allow Blizzard to do this, I believe it's a huge mistake and a missed opportunity for the community. It's not a big of a risk for Blizzard to do this anymore. Nothing even close to 2004. They already have the infrastructure, the teams, and technical details are in place. So for them, it's enormous profits if they don't have to maintain it with patches and content. I can't find the quote, but I remember one of the devs saying that WoW would have been wildly successful with 500,000 active subscribers. I imagine that number today being far lower. With the popularity of Nostarius, we could easily see 5 million plus registered and 2 million plus active. Blizzard has also mentioned that they don't want to manage 2 MMOs, but guess what, my friends? Money talks. Now, sorry about the long post, but that gets things started. The one thing I will just disagree with automatically off the bat, and some of you may have raised an eyebrow at the same point, this user says that we know the subscription that we're getting. We know that it's all going to be under one subscription and that we know we're getting server options through the retail version. Well, we don't know any of that. That's completely something that they've just added to the story, which is not the case. So, but we'll just go from here because the whole point of this is to let's hypothesize on the kind of subscription models that we might be getting and whether or not you feel WoW Classic is worth $15 a month. But just before I get there, here's a few figures for you to keep in mind when we talk money. Now, I found an article from 2008 and it said the following. Keep in mind, this is 10 years ago, 2008, 4 years after WoW launched. Apparently, Blizzard had only spent $200 million on the upkeep of World of Warcraft in the 4 years since launch. So about $50 million per year. It was what it was costing them to keep the payroll for the staff going, support their hardware and have customer service running and things of that nature. $50 million a year. Now, keep that in contrast with what they were actually making. Just off of crunching the numbers from subscription fees and the amount of subscribers they had at the time, and obviously multiplying that by the price per month, they were pulling in around about $1.35 billion per year just from subscriptions. And again, this was in 2008 at one point. So $50 million to run the game, almost $1.5 billion in revenue just from subs. And then you add things like microtransactions. In 2017, did you know that Activision Blizzard as a whole made $4 billion from microtransactions? Holy shit, just think about that. But then obviously you subtract a few things like fewer subscribers now, and obviously there's advertising costs to consider as well. But, you know, you also bump a few things up with inflation and things of that nature. But either way, what I'm trying to get at is we're talking about Blizzard making a shit load of money. It's not a secret. World of Warcraft is big, big, big business for Blizzard. So I just wanted to start with that as we go through all these users talking about whether or not they feel the game is worth $15 a month and whether Blizzard should either change the price or keep it the same or release things in a certain way, and how would they deal with the finances of the game. Now, we start with user XY13 who says this. Most people believe it will be one subscription for retail and classic, so you'll be paying $15 a month to be getting both. Also, if you do a 1 year subscription, it's closer to $12 a month if I remember correctly. That's the price of a movie ticket. I get much more time and enjoyment out of a WoW subscription than I do going to the movies, though this argument is a bit nullified with Movie Pass. Ha ha ha. Now, the point they're making is the subscription model. That seems to be the predominant thought there, that yes, $15 a month is probably what we're going to get. You're probably going to get it all wound up within the retail version. It's going to be one subscription to rule them all, one subscription to bind them, ha ha ha. But will we get both for that price? That seems to be what a lot of people are saying. It does make sense. It targets both audiences, and $15 per month does seem like a pretty fair price, or whatever it is in your country. Think of all the things each month that you blow $15 on. That extra cocktail when you're shit-faced at the bar, that terrible movie on a terrible date, that monthly subscription fee to that 15-year-old video game your wife begs you to quit. Oh, wait, scratch that last one. Okay, that last one's fine. But what I'm getting at is, I think that's a pretty fair price. We all obviously have spent some time paying the subscription fee. We have all at one point of our lives said, yes, Blizzard, I feel that $15 to $20 a month, whatever it is a fair price for your product, and I will continue to pay you for that. So, in the end, we've basically come to terms with the fact that probably we will pay that money and get access to retail and classic, and you just choose which one you want to pay. But we move on to the next post from Wyke Unchained, who says this: back in retail, I had a US and European sub running, so it was costing me plenty to play back then, but I had much lower overheads. Now I have kids and lots of bills, so my disposable income is much lower to me than it was then. Even though I can spend $100 on a night out, so asking for 15% of that for a whole month seems reasonable. Although if I had the option to sub to only classic and not retail at a reduced rate, I would grab that option without hesitation. My issue is I've been playing for free for years, although donating to a few projects, and private realms will only improve with a live database to replicate and not having to study 9 hours of video to find evidence of a bug to make a report. I have no problem paying, it's just a case of how much. I know the hosting and admin costs and profit margins per player for most sub-based games. Blizz has no real cost outlay, other than the staff creating Classic and possibly expanding their customer service and billing departments by maybe 10%. The fact is, if each player is paying $15 a month, Blizz are making about $12 plus off of each player. Current retail customers are guaranteed updates and support, and the margins for profit are smaller as they require more staff for new content than they do for maintaining existing expansion that won't change, as far as we know. My guess is Blizzard will have Classic bundled free with the current retail expansion. My hope is that they offer a standalone option at a reduced rate. Now, the point that user makes is the option of something else. Basically, could we get a standalone option? Could we get a reduced rate, given that it's not retail, it's not getting updated, there are potentially lower overheads, so to speak? Why should the price be the same? Well, think about it this way. What they're suggesting is basically, and my interpretation was that I think they're saying that were you to buy BFA, that could unlock Classic. So Blizzard would essentially, by their suggestion, is they're saying what could happen is you could be forced to buy the retail expansion, and only then can you get into Classic. Well, and it sort of had that bundled for free, quote unquote, situation. Either way, it seems to suggest that it's not only a monthly subscription that you would need to pay Blizzard, but also there's a purchase requirement there, which some people have been very, very prickly about. The thought of buying the game twice is something that doesn't sit well with many of you. But I already own it, you say. Why the fuck would I be made to buy it a second time? That hardly seems fair. Why charge that price when private servers are still an option? And as this user says, he's saying he's been playing the game for free. They better give him something price-wise that is tantalizing to him to have him come over to the official version. Otherwise, he's saying, unfortunately, and I disagree with this, Blizzard is being kind enough to give us an official version. The fact that they're not giving a price point that you're happy with would have you still stick to the private servers. I think that's very wrong. But what they're saying is that there is a point where Blizzard can cross the line and have them still stick to this quote-unquote piracy option. So, at what point do you just think that Blizzard are gouging people given the perhaps low amount of upkeep that might be involved in Classic? Well, we move on to the next point with user Later, who says this: I understand creating Classic servers takes money, and I have no problem with buying World of Warcraft Classic, even though technically I'll be buying the same game again. But what I won't do is buy a separate subscription for Classic WoW. If I have to choose between Classic and Live, I will choose Live, as there are other avenues I can choose for Classic content. And I believe that's a thinly veiled reference to private servers, obviously. But yes, the separate subscription fee and essentially the choice of the two. Imagine if Blizzard were to say, pick one. It is an unpopular opinion. Again, most people think this won't happen, but it's a theory that's out there. Blizzard has a bunch of options before them, a bunch of different pay models that they could go through. Would they consider having people choose? It's like choosing your favorite child. Which one are you going to do? Like the ending of The Good Son. Again, I'm all over with the old movie references today. That's awesome. Anyway, Classic is clearly quite a separate product. Why not lower the fee and make it separate is what this user is sort of saying. If it's so different, if again, we're not getting updates and things of that nature, why not simply make it $10 a month? Perhaps you'd make it $8 a month. Who knows? Isn't that more fair given what we're getting? A 15-year-old game? Let us choose which one we want to subscribe to. Don't simply lump us in and make us pay a higher rate simply because we get access to retail as well. Anyway, moving on to user Minoru from the Countdown to Classic Discord. Yay! And Minoru says the following. I don't think the subscription should be separate to retail. Having it be a single subscription model would lessen the barriers to entry both ways. People in retail interested in Classic can try it freely, and vice versa. You can't do that if it's a separate fee. The current implementation of a demo doesn't really show enough of the game to give players a good idea of what the game truly has to offer. In addition, I'd wager most people being drawn into Classic are not currently subscribed to WoW. Unless you're arguing that the separate subscription also be $15 per month or a regional equivalent for a static game that won't require active development after the initial progression, I fail to see how that will be as profitable or beneficial to Blizzard. I highly doubt many players will quote-unquote double dip their subscriptions for long. It will be one or the other. And the point that I think Minoru is bringing up there is why cannibalize your own user base? Why have people divided like that? What benefit is there in making fans choose when that might not make for good business? As we've established, Blizzard will do what makes them money. They have the data, the analytics, the stats, and they know what makes them money. They have people on the payroll who can tell them exactly what is likely to make them the most amount of money, whether we like what that decision is or not. But it seems that dividing the community even further is not for the best. Let the players mingle and flip-flop between the two. Some days you might feel like playing Classic. One day you might be like, oh, you know what, fuck it. I'll mess around in retail today. You've got access to both. Do what you feel like. Dividing the two does not make that much sense. It would effectively split Blizzard's audience and could crater their profits in a way. Either way, we move on to the next point. With Alice Commotion, who says this. In my opinion, no 15-year-old remake game is worth subscription in general. Will I be paying $15 if it happens, though? Of course. And then user Chaos Gandalf chimes in with this. You're right. It should in all fairness be cheaper than the normal version. Will I personally pay even if it isn't? Yes. And then finally from user Don Luca, who says this. It heavily depends on how Classic WoW will develop. Diablo 3 has a constant influx of changes, new items, balance patches, and so on, and still you only pay at one time when you buy it, plus expansions after, but seasonal changes which include new items, rifts, etc. are all part of the base game. In my humble opinion, WoW Classic, due to its static nature, meaning it won't be expanded, but rather it will have, hopefully, a ladder system with fresh new items and stuff, it's closer to Diablo than World of Warcraft retail. I'd prefer to pay $69.99 or whatever at launch and be good with it, rather than paying $15 per month for a static game. And the point they raise is this, yet another potential model that Blizzard could go with in terms of payment. Do you just buy WoW Classic and no monthly subscription fee? Well, I think we can all agree that's probably not going to happen. Blizzard is not in the game of not taking monthly subscription fees. However, considering we are getting old content without updates, potentially, none of this stuff is new that we're getting in WoW Classic. Why equate the price with your main game that gets heaps of new content on a regular basis? Retail is flushed with new stuff. We know that. They pump it out. So why would you make them the same price when WoW Classic, as far as we know, will not be updated? It doesn't take new work. It won't be pressed forward. There's not new zones that are being thought up by minds as we speak. Shouldn't it be less? Shouldn't it be $10, $8, $5, free? Yeah, Blizz, that'll really show the private servers. You should totally do it for free. Do that, yeah. Anyway, different options before Blizzard, but I don't think that one will really happen, but it's something to think about nonetheless. Back to user Tog Hines, who says this. First off, I'll pay the $15 per month. I know it seems silly. I agree with the reasons why the subscription model isn't quite the same with Classic, etc., yet I'll do it anyway. Stupid? Probably. Fun? Yes. Worth as much as a new movie? Definitely. I'll play Classic WoW more than 2 hours per month. That being said, I've wondered about continued content. As you say, horizontal. Nothing really changes, and no massive changes to the gear itself, rendering what people have already obsolete. But something. Interesting side quests. Something for level 60s to improve their guild in some way, rather than themselves. A community feeling and all that jazz. War efforts. In some ways, have the level 60s become a sort of sandbox style. Give the tools to the players and let them create the content. And the point that user raises is, if we're getting charged, aren't we eventually going to have to get some kind of update just to make us keep on paying? The idea of a good business model is to continue taking payments. So why have the game sit in stasis? Because that's what we asked for, Josh, you're saying. If they start updating it, it becomes retail and the cycle of violence continues. You're crazy. Stop talking about this stuff. Well, you're right in a way, but will you still feel that way 3 years after Classic's release? Let's try and somewhat crystal ball this to a time when you've been sitting in Nax gear for a year or so, sick of creating alts. Why would you continue paying for that? Blizz, as we repeatedly say, will let money dictate what happens from there. Cough, burning Crusader servers. But maybe it's burning Crusader servers. Maybe it's new content altogether. Who knows? But the question remains, at some point, they're going to need to think of something to continue getting our money, or we're going to get sick of paying them money for just the same thing. Some of you might say, no, Josh, you're wrong. I'll play Classic WoW for 10 years. Well, perhaps you will, but I would wager that you'll be in the minority somewhat. Next post. User Zauru193, who says this. Yes, absolutely. I'd pay $50 per month just to get away from the private servers. And their point is, shut up and take my money. We wanted this and we'll pay a lot for it. It feels like a movie trope fighting over detentions in a way. All right, we're going to give you Classic for $15 a month. Oh, yeah? Well, why don't you make it $30 a month? All right, mister, you just bought yourself $30 a month. If you think I won't go higher, do it. I'd like it. All right, that's it. $50 a month for Classic, smartass. Is that all you got? I mean, that's basically how it is. We go up and up. A lot of us are willing to pay quite a bit of money for Classic. I'm sure Blizzard is very, very aware of this. But, I mean, there's got to be a line in the sand where it gets a bit silly. I'm with this person, a little bit hyperbolic. You know what? Fuck it. I probably would pay $50 a month for Classic. What do I care? But a lot of people can't. I do understand that. But really, just wrapping up on this one, getting away from private servers is what a lot of people really want at the end of the day. They want the ability to feel confident in the fact that their character isn't going anywhere and that their money is going to the right place. Is this price really going to be the dividing line for you if you were involved in campaigning for WoW Classic? If you spent all that time and effort pushing hard for this to get here, is it just going to be the price per month that pushes you away? It seems strange. I mean, as far as Blizzard's concerned, just to quote Kanye going, I'm not a businessman, I'm a business, man. Good shit costs money. We know this. We're going to have to pay up for it, and I'm ready. Anyway, we move to the third and final topic of Forum and Fauna, and this one is all about them druids. So last week I touched on our first class in specifics, really, with a paladin post that I went through, and again, I didn't actually play a druid, and it's ironic that I'm covering my two least favorite classes as the first two cabs off the rank in this show, in the classes that we're getting into the specifics with. But anyway, let's try and quickly cover the three things the druids get heat for, and they're all mainly PvE related. It's, sort of known that druids make for the best flag carriers in PvP, and they can heal, and, those are their pros. But people bitch about the cons a lot, and we all know that they're great choices as healers end game, and I know that there's more to the game than just raiding, but let's focus on the gripes that people have with druids, and that's tanking, feral DPS, and boomkins. And just a couple of quick points on each stemming from this particular post that I found, and it read as follows: are druids really that worthless? And the person says, whose name I've forgotten, I'm contemplating rolling my first character as a druid, but am I making a mistake? I don't want to invest dozens of hours only to find out that I wasted them on the yum cha of WoW. I'm definitively looking forward to high-level PvE and PvP, but I got a feeling from other posters that druids are somehow weak, if not definitively a weaker choice than every other class, and have a hard time finding raid spots in raids and dungeons as a result. Is this feeling justified? Now, just before I get into this segment, I just want to point out again, as a lot of you do know, I played a rogue back in the day, so I haven't rolled a druid before, and I might get a few things wrong when I talk about this, so please, if I do, email feedback@countdowntoclassic.com and let me know, and I'll happily clean it up later on. So, just as we get into all of this is for all of you sort of who haven't rolled a druid before and might be considering one for Classic. Here's a few things to know going into that decision. And I'm sure, people, if I get something wrong, write to me, either pleasantly or angrily, and correct me. It's your choice how you do so. But feedback@countdowntoclassic.com if you feel I've gotten something horribly, horribly wrong, and I'll happily correct it on another episode. I played a rogue. I'm not into druids. I've got virtually zero druid experience. So let's see how we go with this. But we're also talking about this just for you people who play druids who might feel a bit invested in the class and feel like some of this information stirs up some old feelings. So let's see how we go. And we start with boomkins with this post from Beezerwit, who says this: they get a bad rep because during retail, vanilla boss fights took 3 times as long, which had them out of mana. They definitely can't compete with melee, but I see no problem bringing one over a mage or a warlock. Even factoring in the crit aura, Moonkin will be behind on DPS. It comes down to how much your raid values an additional battle res. People die, even in the best guilds. Sometimes RNG or a brain lapse happens. With raids already being so druid light, you could potentially be resurrecting a DPS that is going to be doing 800 plus DPS. Or you might not end up having to res anyone. It's a trade-off. I will say that I feel like Moonkin really starts to be more valuable once AQ hits. Fire mages really benefit from the crit aura with their rolling ignites. Bloodvine set is out from ZG. Starfire book is introduced, and you start reaching very high spell crit levels, which makes Starfire scale insanely well with Nature's Grace. And the point there is, let's just start with this. I guess the overriding issue is when you bring one class, you're obviously not taking another. And I know you're saying no shit, Josh. Well, let me just explain myself a little bit more. You're neglecting what one class can bring for this particular one. So when you're choosing a druid, you're obviously giving up some of the benefits that another class could bring that might outweigh what the Druid could bring to the instance or raid. So you have to sit down and decide what's important to you and your group in a raid. Is it that extra battle res? Is it worth the headache that apparently comes with boomkins to have them there? Out of mana issues, is that worth it? Not having enough DPS to justify bringing them over another DPS class, is that worth it to have the battle res? And as they say, fuck-ups do happen. So taking that extra battle res, it very well may be worth it, and it might save you and save a wipe at a certain point. However, we move on to the next point from user Taxoro, who says this. Look, the reason people have their doubts about boomkins is based on actual data and not off one molten core kill in a PvP video. Look at the best boomkin on Anathema, or at least he was back when he played, and they put in a link to a private server player named Papa Blaze. Amazing gear, AQ loot, etc. Number 26 to 27 on DPS, 258 average DPS in Blackwing Lair, half the DPS of the melees, 2/3 the DPS of the casters. Sure, a 3% crit buff to 4 players is good, but it's not going to make up for just how much DPS a boomkin really does. Especially considering the fact that all of these were short fights, with the best guild on the server. And with a boomkin's many problems, it would have been even worse with the guild clearing things slower. Ebon Rock is the single-handed fairest DPS race fight. There's no mechanics, no threat problems, no bullshit. And look at this, 416 DPS. The point there. That's why people are skeptical of boomkins. The numbers don't lie. Guilds hold grudges against certain specs for a reason. It's not born of nothing. These experts crunch the numbers and see the data in play, and they've deemed that spec not to be a great choice over many others for that role. Even when you're highly geared, it's not a cure to the DPS issues of the boomkin. Sure, have fun, play whatever you want, but if you have amazing endgame aspirations, this may not be the spec that you're looking for. Now we turn to tanking with Druids. Via the following long post that I found that was titled, Why Druids Are Bad Tanks, How to Fix Them and Why They Should Not Be Fixed in Classic. So this is a bit of a long one, just listen up. I'll get through it as quickly as I can. This poster was very, very thorough, and they started with, Why Druids Are Bad Tanks. Druid tanks enjoy large health pools and high armor. Even so, they're bad tanks for a number of reasons. Druids take more damage than warriors. Their lack of parry, defensive stance, and block outweighs their high armor value. This makes it more mana intensive to heal druids compared to warriors. Druids' damage intake is more volatile than warriors. Druids can't push crushing blows off the hit table, while warriors can through shield block. Druids can eliminate critical hits from the hit table by having 440 defense skill, but it's not a good idea because they sacrifice other vital stats to do so. Volatile damage intake requires inefficient healing. Druid tank items are sparse and badly optimized. Druids lack a way to break fear in 30-second intervals. Breaking fear is needed in several raid encounters. Druids lack defensive cooldowns. Barkskin cannot be used while shapeshifted, and it didn't exist until a late patch. Druids have nothing like Shield Wall and Last Stand. Druids can't drink potions while shapeshifted, that is until Wrath of the Lich King. Druids have fewer abilities to generate threat and control a fight. They have nothing like Shield Slam, Revenge, Sunder Armor, Shield Bash, or Mocking Blow. And Druids can't wield Thunder Fury, Blessed Blade of the Windseeker, and have nothing analogous to that very special proc. They continue. What would it take to make Druids viable as tanks? We can glean some wisdom from the Burning Crusade expansion. What Druid tanks need is an overhaul of itemization and loot tables, along with new spells and talents. Druids would be better tanks in vanilla with a way to push crushing blows and crits off the hit table, such as the passive block ability and something analogous to Warrior's Shield Block, or a talent like Survival of the Fittest from Burning Crusade, so they don't require as much defense. And the ability to use potions and barkskin in bear form. Improved threat generation through new abilities and talents. The ability to break fear or remove fear mechanics from raids. Changes to loot tables in all raids, but especially in Molten Core and Onyxia. Add leather items with a mix of defense, bonus armor, stamina, strength, and agility. Such items do not currently exist. Improved cat form damage to make ferals desirable as hybrid off-tank / DPS. Leader of the pack buff changed from 3% to 5%. Look, just install the Burning Crusade and play that instead if you're a druid. Ha ha ha, I'm kidding. So with that post, they went on to say why they think it's a bad idea to change druids in Classic, but much of it was the same that we've heard before. You know, they have an identity, every class has pros and cons, blah, blah, blah. I won't get into it, but the food for thought from that post is, if you want to tank in vanilla, you have several options. And many of you are saying, no, Josh, no, you don't. There's only one option, and it's called a warrior. There's nothing else. How dare you? And yes, true, in a way, I guess there are several options, but some are more optimal than others. But as far as druid tanking goes, whilst being fine up to a certain point in that, yes, druids can absolutely tank 5-man dungeons without any dramas, they have been called simply not viable in the end game. So you kind of know what you're getting into if you do roll a druid. There are far fewer tools given to you of the variety that are considered somewhat crucial and standard to the prototypical MMORPG tank. Your performance as a druid tank is kind of hamstrung from the get-go. You can see what talents and abilities you're going to get. There's a few things missing from your utility belt that old Batman the Warrior over there has in theirs. But we move on to the next post with user Ogonaut, who says this. This post is spreading misinformation. Even though I agree that druids shouldn't be changed, druids are completely viable tanks and possibly outperform warriors in many situations. Their threat scales better from gear, since Maul has an additional 1.75 threat modifier, while Heroic Strike has a static plus 145, in brackets 175, threat bonus. On top of that, they get the same 1.495 threat modifier as warriors if they are spec'd into 5 out of 5 feral instinct. Not a single good warrior tank itemizes for plus defense skill on private servers these days. All you need is high armor, stamina, and threat per second. Guess what? Druids have high armor and high stamina, and they also do amazing threat. They are completely viable. It's just a common misconception to think that they are weak due to players wanting 440 defense on tanks back in 2005. So what that user is raising is that there's apparently been a little bit of a stats misinterpretation. Armor versus defense. Is that as big an argument as changes versus no changes? If so, I'd better duck before I get a chair thrown at me. But where do you lie on this one? Do you agree with the propositions put forward by that post? This poster is suggesting that in spite of the druid having fewer threat-generating abilities on their person, they get a better scaling for threat from gear than warriors do, and thus have their viability increased. And that's all this poster is really asking for, just a concession that they are a viable option, not necessarily suggesting they're optimal. There's a lot of numbers flying around in that post that I'm sure a lot of you are probably nodding along with or crunching right now to make sure that they check out. But I know that my head is swimming when I hear all those numbers. I'm like, what the fuck is going on here? Can I just go back to being a dumb rogue and slice some stuff up without having to worry about all these threat numbers that are so important in vanilla? Which is probably going to be problematic because I'm wanting to play a tank in Classic, so I guess I better start studying now. But anyway, we'll see how we go. And we move on to feral DPS to round it out. This is a big one. And we start with a post from user Oh Knows Cool, who says this. Feral forms don't scale with weapon damage, only stats. Every other non-caster class does. They fix that later by adding feral attack power as a free stat to weapons, which allows a form to scale based on the DPS of your weapon. That's probably the biggest reason feral can't keep up. There are other reasons, such as bleeds not scaling, poor energy options, and no weapon skill increases, etc. As gear scales, feral falls farther and farther behind. That's why many people at the higher end of PvP will choose a balanced hybrid over a feral hybrid. Virtually no one plays a competitive pure spec druid in PvP. Next we get user JoeBobby1523 who says this. You do 50 to 70% of the DPS of an equally geared rogue under optimal conditions. To get to 70%, you also have to employ power shifting. That is shifting in and out of cat form to generate energy. It's a horrible rotation and clunky as hell. Druids are great off tanks and secondary DPS for raids, but if you just want a DPS, don't roll Druid. And the point those users are raising is this. There was an alleged misapplication of weapon damage for feral druids. They weren't enjoying the benefits that other classes were, and thus they could be considered broken in a way. So what gives Blizzard? You create what appears to be a DPS spec, but then don't allow weapon damage scaling. Sure, it was addressed eventually, but this was one of the many instances of Blizzard not really being able to balance or handle this particular spec and its place in the game. Again, we have an instance of DPS falling behind, and why would you choose this class over another that can bring more to the table? A rogue perhaps, or a mage? If it takes every ounce of your strength and skill as a player to output 70% of the DPS of a rogue who's on cruise control, then why would you bother? Well, we find out with the next post from user Casper724, who says this. You don't play quote-unquote DPS druid or quote-unquote cat druid in vanilla. You play a feral druid, and having the proper gear/talent/consumes to tank when needed is more important than your DPS. If you only stick in cat form 90% of the time, you're about as useful as a freshly dinged 60 rogue in greens. If you can, however, pick up adds in bear form, innovate healers when they go out of mana, decurse/cure poison for relevant fights, battle res people when it's called for, and power shift in cat form to boost your DPS, then you can be an asset to almost any raid. Good players can always find a raid spot. It just requires you know how to use your class to the fullest. And obviously the point there is that there's much more to it than what we heard before. Jack of all trades, master of none. Druids are quite a complex class, and this was never hidden from us by Blizzard simply by virtue of the shapeshifting mechanics. Your role in a dungeon or raid can change in a split second as a feral druid. Your benefit to the party lies in your adaptability to any given situation. Sure, you're feral, but that doesn't mean staying parked in cat form. If you are, you're doing it wrong. Be what the other classes can't be. A badass Swiss Army knife who might not be the MVP of everything, but at least you're in the game. Anyway, that's it for Druids. I hope I haven't done a disservice to the plight of the vanilla Druid. But for now, that's been Forum and Fauna, and now it's time for anger management. Each episode, Countdown to Classic comes to you with some of the angriest posts that I've found in the forums through the week. And again, this week, I'm going to have to keep my voice down a little bit just because it's past 1 o'clock in the morning and I really need to get this episode out to you, and the neighbor's going to kill me if I raise my voice. So, let's see how we go. And I'll start with user Jadnid Bobson, who says this, and this is regarding the unpopular opinions from before. If you make the choice as a level 60 to kill a lobby who's just minding his own business questing, you are a dick. Next we have user Touch Me There, number 9, who says this. Actually, the game will be changed. There'll be a ton more drunk people playing. A large portion of the vanilla audience weren't old enough to drink legally back in the early 2000s, but we're damn sure old enough now. Next we have user Swivel, who's talking about the subscription model topic, and they say this. Here we go again. People with no thought wanting to spend money. Let them put a sub on a game that's already racked up over $2,000 from me. It will be a big no thanks. Plenty of other games out there. Then you have the people saying server maintenance, etc., while ignoring the other 6 games that are on Battle.net that don't charge a sub. I blame it on the Common Core bullshit of the last 20 years or so. Hey guys, take my monies. I has no common sense and would love to give my money away for a 14-year-old game. Herp derp. I said it before and I'll continue saying it. A one-time charge for the remastered vanilla and done. Being extremely conservative at 500,000 times $60 equals $30 million. They already have data centers and people supporting the servers and infrastructure. Don't buy into the bullshit that they won't be making money off of a game that doesn't require a sub. Next we have user Jay from the Countdown to Classic Discord channel, who says this about Druids and their vanilla issues. Aquatic Form Quest. What a fuck around that was. If it wasn't for Thoughtbot, I know for sure I never would have done that stupid quest. Next we have Harland from the official forums. So you played Feral and sat your entire time in cat form trying to make believe you were playing a rogue when it couldn't be further from the truth. There were a lot of Druids who thought they could 100% specialize into a single form and sit in that the entire time without utilizing all their other forms and abilities, because somehow in their mind, 85% of the rest of the entire class is useless and good for nothing. And the irony is that couldn't be further from the truth. You just weren't as good as you thought you were. If you had have been as good as you thought you were, you would have been wrecking every class or build in Battlegrounds because of the insane utility and mobility that Druids have. And that's been anger management, and now it's time for winners and losers.
It wasn't going to be easy, but they've won it.
Every Monday, Countdown to Classic brings you some of the more thoughtful, funny, or insightful posts of the week that I've come across. And I start with user Cornholy, who, in regards to the first topic of the week, being the unpopular opinions, says this. And they itemized 4 points that they had in relation to this, 4 unpopular opinions, and they said this. Number 1, all of the people that keep saying don't read guides or watch videos, don't download add-ons. In fact, we should just ban add-ons, give me the impression that they don't actually really enjoy vanilla. They just want to re-experience their first MMO. Number 2, players being elitist towards unwanted specs and classes is not something that only hardcore guilds do. It is something that is done by every single type of player. Number 3, current private servers are in general very accurate, and they will give us a good idea of how Classic will play out in the future. And number 4, having perfect server faction ratios with Blizz-like populations and short battleground queues is a pipe dream. So players are going to have to get used to the idea that cross realms might be a very real thing in Classic. Next we have user STF Uppercut Out Last, who says this. Classic is worth up to and including $100 per month regardless of what they release. They could sell me dirty diapers in a burnt orange electric Prius with a plastic vinyl that says Classic on the side. I'd buy it, I'd drive it, and I'd take selfies near it, even though I've never taken a selfie before. Next we have user Harland again, who says this. Druids were only down and out in the early days of vanilla. Many things changed in mid-vanilla, including buffs to druids and nerfs to rogues and mages in regard to PvP. There were a few druids on my server that I did quite a lot of battlegrounds with, and they were incredibly powerful. To say they sucked is just wrong. The truth is most players could not play druid to its most basic capacity. This was true for most classes of the time, and it's even true on the private realms nowadays. Vanilla WoW classes do not hold your hand and play your character for you. You play your character, or it tears your arm off. Next we have user Dilato, who says this. Your primary benefit in coming to the raid as a druid is just that. You're a druid. You get strong buffs, combat res, and innovate. You're not supposed to do the same DPS as a DPS class who only brings that one thing, higher damage to take down the boss. When you bring all that utility simply by being there as a druid, it would be imbalanced, to be honest. I wouldn't say don't roll druid if you don't want a DPS though. I'd just say be prepared for what that's going to mean. Druid first, DPS second, because Druid isn't purely a DPS, no matter how you spec. Most people come to the conclusion that the optimal way to play a Druid in raids is healing, which is true in the sense that it brings its utility alongside a similar amount of healing to every other healer. But then every other healer also have non-optimal DPS specs and great utility, and it shouldn't deter you from playing as you wish. And as we all know, when there's winners, there's got to be a loser. And this week, the loser is actually me for not understanding a little bit about this post. And we'll get into it. But please email me, listeners, and tell me what I don't know about this post. But I'll get into it with Party Pooper's submission, which says this. I highly doubt that they will try and force us to buy BFA to play Classic. While as a business that seems like sound logic, it has already failed for Activision before. I doubt Blizzard's partner is not going to say anything about them potentially pulling the same mistake that Activision did with Call of Duty. Now here's why I'm the loser. I don't know the muck-up that Activision did with Call of Duty before. Was there something about selling a game within a game or something, or some payment method that I've completely missed with Call of Duty, some subscription service that they completely fucked up? Please do email me at feedback@countdowntoclassic.com and let me know, oh yeah, Josh, this is why they've gotten it wrong before. There was this total Call of Duty stuff-up that you don't know about. Please do tell me, and I'm the loser for the week. And with that, now it's time for Memory Lane. Each Monday, Countdown to Classic comes to you with a few listeners' favourite stories from back in the vanilla days. And again, I just want to say I'm sorry to everyone who's written in. I can't fit you all in this week, but if you don't hear your story, I will get to it on Wednesday or Friday. So don't think that you wrote to me for nothing. I will get to you. But I'll start with user Necro George from our Discord channel, who says the following. My fondest memories of vanilla was waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning to play Vanilla WoW on my brother's account, since he played most of the day and I had school the next day. And yes, I did fall asleep. Worth it. Very good. Next we have, again, Discord user Jay, who says this. Not long after I dinged 60 on my resto Druid, I was in need of raid consumes, mana potions and the like. So off to the auction house I go and start buying a few stacks of this and that. All of a sudden I'm out of gold and realised I was paying 99 gold a pop for a single major mana potion. I 100% misread the price and thought it was 99 silver. Fuck. Next we have listener Derek Stenman, who says the following. Hey Josh, I started playing WoW all the way back in 2004. I was in the first grade at the time, so I never got far at all, but I kept at it. I rolled an undead priest. Even though I'm an alliance main now, undead will always be my favourite race. I fell in love with Tirisfal Glades. The eerie aesthetic, zombies everywhere, crusaders killing everyone. It was amazing. Anyway, I remember doing quests in Venom Web Vale, and that's where I saw the Bulwark for the first time. This foreboding mountain pass filled with carts, barrels, and shields, basically anything to narrow the pass, was really creepy. Seeing that the area I was in was already creepy enough, I wanted to know what the Bulwark was trying to keep out. I passed the Argent Guards and went through into the Western Plaguelands. It was horrifying. Just death everywhere. I knew I shouldn't have been there, but I pressed on. The path narrowed through the forest, but I knew that monsters didn't cross the path, so I was safe. I had never been so wrong. Out of nowhere, I hear this scary-ass growl. I nearly jumped out of my seat when I saw this half-decayed zombie bear hurtling towards me. I tried to run, but it was too late. This fucker one-hit me, and I had to corpse run for 20 minutes just to attempt to get out. Little did I know, this was the fabled welcome bear of the Western Plaguelands. I didn't go near the Bulwark for the rest of my time playing Classic, thinking it was just a death zone. Next we have listener Jacob, who says this. Hey Josh, howdy from North Carolina. I've been listening to your show for a couple of weeks now and thought I'd finally had a good enough reason to write in. Anyway, I started playing in early middle school and was not exactly a smart player. After leveling many class and race combos, I finally settled on Paladin. Being the noob that I was, I leveled Holy because I enjoyed healing dungeons. I would spend entire weekends playing from sun up to sundown, just grinding AV. But I was never good. I looted everything I could but never turned anything in. I would use Holy Shock to try and snipe kills instead of keeping my teammates alive. I was an all-around bad player, but I loved AV, so I played it anyway. I ended up playing it so much that I had all the marks I needed for the mount, but not the training to use it. As far as PvE goes, my favourite item in vanilla dropped from the Emperor in BRD. The first time I saw it drop, I laughed uncontrollably and was so heartbroken when I didn't win the roll for it. Not a single person in my group got the joke, but I did. The Emperor's new cloak was a back item that was entirely visible. I figure you'd get that since you made a joke about the Emperor's new clothes recently. I guess that was more two separate memories. Oh well, now you won't have a shortage again, hopefully. Keep putting out the great content. It gives me something to look forward to in my boring office job. And I say thank you very much for that submission, Jacob, and I'm glad to brighten up your day a little bit. And that's it for Memory Lane. We're almost at the end of the show. Just a few clean-up notes and shout-outs and show notes. Now, not very quickly, it's a bit of a semi-long one, but just a couple of clean-up notes, everyone. So I got 2 emails from things I've said in the past that actually helped me out a bit. So I got this one from Anonymous Transmogger during the week, and they said the following. Hey Josh, just wanted to say I love the show. It's a highlight in my podcast queue and I look forward to each new episode every week. Well, thank you very much. I heard you mention you wanted feedback from fans on Transmog and opinions of it in regards to Classic. I should preface by saying I'm a diehard fan of Transmog as it stands on live, especially with the changes Legion brought to collection systems as a whole. But for as much as I love the Transmog system on retail, I strongly believe it has absolutely no place in Classic WoW. As I said above, I think the Transmog system serves as an excellent vessel to expose players to content/art that they might rarely or never encounter. But in Classic, there's just no need. I do, however, have one gripe about an argument from those against Transmog. I know I'll be flamed for this unpopular opinion, but I think that the idea of your gear's appearance should reflect your accomplishments is simply ridiculous. I'm fine with bad or casual players not looking good, but why extend that punishment to good or invested players? Anyone who competes at the top level in either PvP or PvE will be wearing a mishmash of items and sets for optimization. Whatever gear happens best in slot rarely matches a coordinated set appearance. Why would Blizzard bother putting so much time and effort into making beautiful and thematic class sets if nobody was going to use them? I believe that Blizzard intended the appearance of the set to be just as much of a reward as the stat bonuses on the item themselves. I know it's a change, #no changes, and a dumb one at that, but it would be neat to see an option for players who have collected all the items in a given set and are equipping some pieces of it to be able to transmog the rest of their gear to match, even if it's only temporary, maybe just long enough for a guild kill pick. Maybe it's only client-side so they get to enjoy looking cool while everyone else sees them the same. I don't know. I could ramble on about this for hours more, but I think I've said my piece. Overall, keep transmog out of Classic. But it'd be nice to reward high-level players, to let them look even cooler than they already do. Cheers from Anonymous Transmogger. Thank you very much, Anonymous Transmogger. I think that was a nice little shedding of light on some people's opinions on transmogging. And even though you say it has no place in Classic, it's interesting to hear why you love it the way that you do. Anyway, we go next to an email from Jacob from earlier, who adds this. Josh, on your show about Warsong Gulch, you mentioned how imbalanced racials and talents were between Horde and Alliance. The only reason I can think of where talents might be biased is when they combine with racials like the Axe specialization talents, synergizing with Orc's Axe specialization racial. I don't know, I'm no theory crafter, but imbalanced racials brings me to my second point. I don't know if it's true or not, but I've always heard rumors that the racials are so imbalanced because the developers didn't really plan on PvP being a big part of the game. So they weren't designed with PvP balance in mind. This might be something you can look into for a future show. And I say thank you very much for that, Jacob, and that does make a little bit of sense, and I think I might have actually read that before, and I wish I knew that before I said that on the last episode. So thanks again for helping me out, guys, clear up a few things. Now finally, just a couple of shout-outs. Chris from Denmark, Necro George, Jimmy Lee Wheeler, thank you so much. All of you have gotten in touch with me and said some very kind words through the week or just said hello. And I always will say thank you and take the time to shout out to fans who do the same for me. Now, moving on, we're almost done. Just a shout out to my amazing Discord users. The chat has been phenomenal this week, everyone. You're super polite. You're super knowledgeable about the game. I've had the chance to jump on voice chat with a number of you now, introduce myself, said hello, shot the shit. Thank you to all of you for making that Discord an amazing place. And if you haven't already joined up, please do. The link is in the show notes. Now, coming this week on the show, show. We have an interview with listener Dustin on Wednesday all about raid speedrunning, which I know you're all going to find just as interesting and insightful as I did. Whether or not you have speedrunning aspirations of your own in Classic or not. Then, on Friday, I'm thinking about mixing things up and doing a bit of a history of player-driven events in World of Warcraft. Not doing a lore episode this week, just to give the people a little bit of something different. But even though I know a lot of you love the lore, and I do as well, I just think a rest for 1 week and focusing on something else like a history of World of Warcraft kind of thing could be a bit of fun. I won't include the Corrupted Blood incident just because that's going to get its own entire episode one day. But as usual, just the usual things, guys. Please follow me on Twitter at Counts2Classic with the number 2. Subscribe to the show where you get your podcasts. And please, 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 if you haven't already, throw me a review on iTunes. It helps so much. It really does. And last but not least, I can only advertise this thing so much, guys. A lot of you have gotten back to me and said, Josh, this show is amazing. We love it so much. We wish it got more attention than it does. Guess what? So do I. And thank you so much for the kind words. But the best thing you can do to help me out is please just tell a friend. Tell somebody about the show. Pass the word of mouth on, and hopefully we can grow this audience. And it has been happening, everyone. The audience is growing week by week. Another record-setting week coming in for Countdown to Classic. I'm blown away by I think we're going to get about 4,500 downloads this week. It was 3,500 last week. It's growing and growing and growing, and it's all because of you getting the positive vibes out there and telling people. But please keep going. Thank you so much. And I promise as we grow, it's only going to be better for you because the show will be able to do more for you, and I'll have more news for that later on. But thank you so much. That's been the Monday episode. I'll see you all on Wednesday. Bye.